Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Mr. J with W.a.D MTG. Back at you again for a deck tech upgrade. Now, last week I did the Anikthea deck tech as it performed well for me on Spell Table last weekend. I think I didn't get to it till Monday or Tuesday because the potential of me going out to Vegas. So it was one of them things where I got to at the last second and I just did the deck tech. But as I was going through the deck tech, and going through the lines and the play patterns of the deck, it occurred to me that there were a lot of cards that didn't really fit, or that might have kind of fit, but there could be a lot of improvements to be made there. So as it was churning in my head over the week, I was like, okay, well, when this weekend comes up and I'm sitting in my truck watching like standard World Tournament Magic and stuff, in Vegas, I can sit there and pull out my box, and because I got my bag with me, it's my deck builder kit, and I can go through my cards and I can find one-for-one replacements for the cards that I don't really think fit, or that I kind of think fit, but I think there could be better replacements, or just higher card quality, more synergy, lower mana curve, just basically overall like no-brainer upgrades to the deck tech. So I feel like all my decks, I'll probably be able to do that with almost all my decks as I go through the deck techs and go through the lines and the strategies of the deck. I'm going to see that, I made some mistakes, or I put some cards in there that don't really fit. So for Anikthea, I pulled out 6 cards and replaced it with 6 cards. So I'm going to get into it. The first card is W.a.D over here. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield for 3, a white and a black. As I was going through the deck tech, there was only 2 cards in the deck that were like a sorcery instant, and one of them was a tutor card that allowed me to tutor for artifact or enchantment. So the tutor's not coming out, but there's no real need for W.a.D. There's a bunch more redundancy in the deck to bring back enchantments and stuff from the graveyard, because it's target permanent, so it could be a creature or enchantment or whatever. So I really don't think I needed it. There's more redundancy. There's more like proficient spells and enchantments that I have in the deck that can do the same exact thing. So for 1 less mana, I decided a 1-for-1 replacement for W.a.D to be Case of the Locked Hothouse. Now, as I went through the deck tech, I explained that ramping was one of the weaknesses of the deck, where it didn't really particularly ramp all that well. So I think Case of the Locked Hothouse is a no-brainer 1-for-1. Not only is it going to add a little bit of ramp to the deck, but it's also an enchantment, not a sorcery, so I get that extra synergy where I can draw off my enchantresses, but also so I can play an additional land on each of my turns. To solve it, I control 7 or more lands. So if I manage to ramp effectively and it's solved, once it's solved, I can look at the top card of my library at any time, and then I can play lands and cast creatures and enchantment spells from the top of my library. Now, when I was going through my cards, I went through the green and black. I didn't get to go through the white. As I was going through my cards looking for replacements for these cards, and I ran over Case of the Locked Hothouse, I was like, now this is just a super auto-include in this deck, because other than Soul Ring and Arcane Signet and the tutor card, every other card in the deck is a creature or an enchantment. So I can play lands, creature, and enchantments. There's only 3 misses. It can only whip 3 different ways. I can pretty much play my entire deck off the top of my library with Case of the Locked Hothouse. So I think that's a better card quality include there. It's a 1-for-1 swap. I'm up 1 mana on the curve with that swap. So the next card is Intangible Virtue for 1 and a white. Creature tokens I control get +1/+1 in Vigilance. Now, originally when I built the deck, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm making a lot of tokens. So, let's give them a buff ability. Let's give them, some vigilance so they can swing in and stay back and block for me. And vigilance, I really do think vigilance is underrated in Commander. But I really think Intangible Virtue is not necessary in the deck. It doesn't do enough for me for 2 mana. It just doesn't do enough. And I am making a lot of tokens, but do I really care if my tokens have vigilance? Is it that important? In this deck, I don't think so. If it was that important, like with the angel tokens, I can just make more angel tokens and leave a couple back to block and be a little more strategic. So as a 1-for-1 replacement for Intangible Virtue, I went with Ripples of Undeath. This one I also think it's just a no-brainer auto swap out include for Intangible Virtue. Same mana cost. It's an enchantment. So it's a 1-for-1, easy 1-for-1. At the beginning of my pre-combat main phase, I mill 3 cards. So it's filling my graveyard and fueling my graveyard strategy where I'm reanimating enchantments. It's setting up my commander. It's on curve. And then if I do, I can put I can pay 1 and 3 life, and then I can put a card from among those cards into my hand. So even if I mill, like let's say I mill a couple enchantments, let's say I mill an enchantress, I can pay that 1 and add that enchantress just straight to my hand. On curve, on turn 3, I'm going to be able to play an additional land, pay the 1 mana for adding the enchantress to my hand, and still play the enchantress. So I think it's just a perfect 1-for-1 swap, Ripples of Undeath with Intangible Virtue, and it adds more card draw where the deck doesn't struggle with card draw at all. But it adds a little bit more, and it also fuels the graveyard strategy. So I think it's perfect include. The next one is Virtuous Strength. That card has done well for me in the deck. Because it does bring back its sorcery for 1. It does bring back a land card from my graveyard to my hand, but I don't really think that's worth it. The worth it ability is this 7 mana cost ability where I tap a basic land for mana and I can add 3 times as much mana of that mana instead. Now I thought about adding that elf into the deck where all my lands were basic lands, so it would triple up all my lands, but do I really want to do that? Is that really efficient? I don't think so in this deck. In this deck, I don't think that's efficient. Instead, I went with Mana Reflections because, let's say I have 6 mana in a Mana Rock, right? Like an Arcane Signet. And I cast Virtuous Strength. Well, less than 50% of the mana in the deck, it's like 43% or something of the mana in the deck are basics. So every time I think I've had it in play, I've had 3 basics in play. So 3, 6, 9, and then 3 more is 12. But if I just had 6 mana in play and I played Mana Reflections, if I tap a permanent for mana, it produces twice as much of that mana instead. That's still 12 mana. So it's doubling up all my lands, so it's just more efficient. And it's 1 less pip. So I gain a pip, it's 1 less colorless. So I gain a mana on curve for the deck, which makes it, more resilient, more efficient, and it's doubling up more of my mana, which essentially is giving me the same exact outcome in a more efficient way. Plus, if a permanent was tapped for mana, it gives you twice as much of that mana instead. So that still hits my Arcane Signet, that still hits my Soul Ring, that still hits my couple mana dorks that I have in the deck. So overall, it's just a more efficient card for this particular deck, the way I have it built. Perfect swap, perfect include. Let's move on to the next one. So for the 4th card, I've got Soul Warden for 1 white. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, I gain a life, which is fine, but I'm not playing a whole lot of creatures. I'm playing a whole lot of enchantments. And other people play creatures, and I do play a lot of tokens. So it does gain me life, it does add to the strategy, but it's not like it's an enchantment creature. So for the 2 mana, the 2 pips I'm up on curve, I decided to replace it with Cursor or Crucifix, which was originally in the pre-con that I already took out, but I put it back in. So it is an enchantment creature, so it is going to trigger my enchantresses. It is going to get that extra synergy, and it will also help me ramp because I play with the top card of my library revealed, and I can play land cards from the top of my library. Well, same as Curse of the Locked Hothouse, I can play an additional land. I can play lands from the top. I can play lands and enchantments from the top. If I don't have it solved, it's still going to power up the Cursor or Crucifix. Plus, I have the Dryad of Elysian Grove in the deck, which is also an enchantment creature, which allows me to play additional lands. And if I'm triggering with my enchantresses and drawing, chances are the best way for me to ramp is to play additional lands on my turn because I'm going to have a handful of lands from drawing so many cards. So I think Cursor or Crucifix was a really, really good replacement. Evened up my mana across the 4 cards on curve with the Soul Warden. Plus, it has the landfall ability where whenever a land enters the battlefield under my control, I gain a life. So I'm still gaining life. I'm still pushing forward with the life gain strategy in the deck. I'm not really taking much away from the deck. I'm adding more synergy and a better ability to ramp. So across the board so far, across 4, it seems like just perfect swap outs for, a casual deck. So the next one, the 5th card in the list is Kamiya Transcendence. For 1 and a green, it's a creature spirit. It's not an enchantment creature. It's just a creature spirit with trample. And whenever I cast an enchantment, I get a +1/+1 counter on him. And he's a 2/2, so he can get pretty big in the deck because I play a lot of enchantments. But why am I really worried about making my creatures big in an Enchantress deck? That's not really how it wins. It wins with overwhelming value, where it snowballs out of control, and I'm making, you know, doubled up versions of tokens and doubled up enchantments that are, you know, doing broken things if I have more than one of them or multiples of them in play. So the Kamiya Transcendence ability to bring itself back from the graveyard if someone destroys an enchantment, it's not giving me any real card advantage. It's not really doing anything for me. I don't think it's that great of a card in this particular deck the way it's built. So a 1-for-1 swap. It does take 2 green pips, but it's the same mana cost. I decided to put in Search for Greatness. So in Search for Greatness is an enchantment for 2 green. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the high converted mana cost among other permanents you control without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you can scry one. So if you look back into the deck tech, or you watch the deck tech video, you'll know that I have several high drop enchantments in the deck. 5 drops, 6 drops, 7 drops, 8 drops even. I also have several big creatures in the deck, 6 drops, 7 drops in the deck. So I can go right up on curve with Search for Greatness and be able to trigger, and potentially drop huge bombs for free. And if not, I can scry a card and improve my card selection. It is an enchantment, where Kamiya Transience isn't an enchantment, so it will also trigger my enchantresses, which allow me to draw more cards. And it'll help me dig. Let's say I need a land or an answer. It'll help me dig for that answer and gives me that better card selection. So overall, across 5 cards, awesome. I'm even in mana and on curve, and every card 1-for-1 is just better overall. Better overall card quality, and I was able to take the cards out of the deck that don't really seem like they fit in the deck. So as the 6th pick, it's a big creature, a 5-drop creature, Nethroi, Apex of Death. Now Nethroi is a cool card, and it is a cool card in these colors, but like I said, do I really need to bring back creatures from the graveyard? If I did, why wouldn't I put like Dance of the Dead or Necromancy or something in there for Nethroi, Apex of Death? I would gain a bunch of mana. I thought about it, but those cards are high power cards, and they're a little more expensive, and they're in my one of my CEDH decks. So I decided not to try it, as I don't have multiple copies of them. A Dance of the Dead or Necromancy, or I forget what the other one's called, the 2-drop. There's another 2-drop. But I got all 3 of them, and they're all in one of my CDH decks. So it's Rafine. But I decided not to replace Nethroi with one of those abilities, because, I mean, if I really needed the ability, it's 7 mana in Nethroi to mutate. If you just play him, he's just a 5/5 Death Touch lifelink. But to mutate him to get that ability, it cost me 7 mana. There's way better things in this deck I can be doing for 7 mana. So for the 6 card slot, it just seemed perfect to me to replace Nethroi with 6. You know, it just seemed like fate. 6 card I took out of the deck, replace him with 6, and 6 just does everything for this deck. So he's not an enchantment creature, but neither was Nethroi. He does add 2 mana off of the curve in the deck, so it does improve the curve in the deck. And it is a 2/4 legendary creature Treefolk with reach, and that's something I struggle to block flying creatures as well until I get out, start getting out angel tokens. And by the time I start, you know, popping out angel tokens, I'm looking to win the game. So blocking isn't what I'm trying to do anyways. But 6, I just feel like he does everything for the deck. I had 3 copies of 6, and I haven't put it in any decks yet. So as I'm going through my cards that, you know, I've pulled recently since like the summertime when Modern Horizons 3 came out, and I was buying cards and not really subbing anything because I was going through so much in life and moving and putting all my stuff in storage and transitioning into living in the truck and in hotels and stuff like that. I didn't have my cards with me at that point. So when I'm looking through and I seen 6, I'm just like, this is just so perfect, because whenever 6 attacks, mill 3 cards. So it's doing the same thing that Ripples of Undeath is doing. It's fueling my graveyard. It's filling it up. It's adding to the strategy of throwing ridiculously strong enchantments into the graveyard and being able to bring them back with Anikthea. And whenever he attacks, I mill 3 cards, and I can put a land card from among them into my hand. So it's also adding to land fixing, which was something that could be ramp if I got a case of the locked hot house or Dryad of Elysian Grove or something like that on the field. So I'll be able to add it, play an additional land, or add that land and play it as land for turn so I don't miss my land drop. And then as long as it's my turn, non-land permanent cards in my graveyard have retrace. So if I need an enchantment and I don't have a way to bring back one of those enchantments, I can still do that with 6, because I can cast a permanent card from my graveyard by discarding a land in addition to paying for its other cost. So literally, he fuels everything that the deck is trying to do. He's an absolute perfect include in the deck, and he's a perfect 6 replacement for the 6 card is 6. And that's the deck upgrades for Anikthea after doing the deck tech. I look forward to the next one with you guys. I'm going to probably do... what's his name? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But as I go through and I do the deck techs, I'm going to do this for, I think, probably every deck. If I go through and see that there's a strategy as I built it, that there's cards that just don't fit, or they're outclassed, or as I'm going through the lines in the deck, as I'm going through the deck tech, I'm just like, these cards don't really fit, and I'm going to look for replacements and try and find something better. And that's all I got this time. Thanks, guys. It's Mr. J with W.A.D. MTG. I'm out. Peace.